Commander Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck of Earth's newest military installation, watching the strangest sight in human history. Below her, in the massive construction bay, thousands of workers swarmed around what could only be described as the most ridiculous spaceship ever built. The vessel looked like someone had taken a cruise ship, a shopping mall, and a carnival, then somehow managed to weld them all together in space. Bright neon lights flickered across its hull in patterns that spelled out "Welcome Aboard" in 17 different languages. A giant disco ball rotated slowly at the ship's center, casting rainbow reflections across the nearby asteroids. "Admiral, I have to ask again," Sarah said into her communicator. "Are you absolutely certain this is our secret weapon?" Admiral Rodriguez's voice crackled back through the speakers, tinged with exhaustion. "Commander Chen, I know how it looks. Trust me, I've had the same doubts for months, but the simulation results don't lie. This ship has a 97.3% success rate against every enemy fleet we've tested it against." Sarah shook her head as she watched a crew of engineers install what appeared to be a neon sign advertising "Galactic Buffet, all species welcome," on the ship's port side. "Sir, with respect, this thing looks like a floating theme park, not a warship." "That's exactly the point," Rodriguez replied. "The Zephyrian Empire has conquered 14 star systems in the past year. Their ships are faster, their weapons are stronger, and their shields can deflect anything we throw at them. Every human fleet that's faced them has been destroyed within hours." Sarah knew he was right. The Zephyrians had appeared from the outer rim of the galaxy 6 months ago, sweeping through human colonies like a cosmic hurricane. Their technology was centuries ahead of anything humanity possessed. Traditional warfare had proven completely useless against them. "So instead of building bigger guns," she said slowly, "we built this?" "The USS Festivity," Rodriguez confirmed. "Our most advanced psychological warfare vessel." Sarah watched as another team of workers installed a massive slide that spiraled around the ship's hull from top to bottom. Children from the nearby civilian station pressed their faces against the windows, pointing excitedly at the colorful spectacle. The ship's design team had outdone themselves in creating the most non-threatening vessel imaginable. The hull was painted in cheerful pastels, pink, yellow, and sky blue. Instead of weapon ports, the ship bristled with speakers, holographic projectors, and what appeared to be cotton candy machines. The engine section had been disguised to look like a massive carousel, complete with painted horses that actually moved up and down. "Commander," came a voice from behind her. Sarah turned to see Dr. Elena Vasquez, the project's chief psychologist, approaching with a tablet in her hands. "I wanted to brief you on the ship's operational systems before we depart." "Please tell me there are actual weapons hidden somewhere on this thing," Sarah said hopefully. Dr. Vasquez smiled. "In a way, yes, but not the kind you're thinking of. The Festivity is equipped with the most advanced entertainment and hospitality systems ever created. We have theaters showing movies from 1,000 different worlds, restaurants serving cuisine from every known species, and games that can accommodate any form of alien biology." Sarah stared at her. "You're planning to invite the Zephyrians to a party?" "Exactly," Vasquez said, her eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. "Our analysis of Zephyrian society shows they're a rigidly militaristic culture. They've spent the last 1,000 years focused entirely on conquest and expansion. They have no concept of leisure, entertainment, or fun. So we're going to introduce them to the most addictive substances in the universe: good food, comfortable furniture, and endless entertainment. The human brain releases dopamine when we experience pleasure, but we've discovered that the Zephyrian brain has an even stronger response to novel experiences." Sarah began to understand. "You're planning to get them hooked on human culture. The simulations show that when exposed to Earth entertainment for just 3 hours, the average Zephyrian warrior loses 67% of their aggressive tendencies. After 8 hours, they start asking questions about vacation time and retirement plans. Through the observation window, Sarah could see the ship's crew conducting final tests on the various systems. A holographic banner appeared above the ship, reading, "Grand Opening, Free Admission," while speakers began playing an upbeat tune that somehow managed to be catchy without being annoying. Captain James Murphy, the festivities commanding officer, appeared on the deck looking frazzled. His uniform had been modified to look like a cruise ship captain's outfit, complete with gold braiding and a peaked cap. "Commander Chen, we're ready for final inspection." Sarah followed Murphy and Dr. Vasquez into the ship through an airlock that had been disguised as the entrance to an amusement park. Inside, the corridors were wide and brightly lit, with moving walkways and directional signs that looked like something from a vacation resort. "The bridge has been redesigned as a hospitality command center," Murphy explained, leading them through a corridor lined with arcade games. "Instead of weapon controls, we have entertainment scheduling, menu planning, and guest services coordination." They entered the bridge to find it transformed into something resembling a cruise ship's entertainment director office. Multiple screens showed different areas of the ship, but instead of tactical displays, they showed dance floors, restaurants, and gaming areas. The captain's chair had been replaced with a comfortable recliner. "Sir," said Lieutenant Torres from the communications station, which had been decorated to look like a DJ booth, "we're receiving clearance for departure. The Zephyrian fleet is 3 days out from the Centauri system." "Excellent," Murphy said, settling into his recliner. "Set course for the Centauri system. Maximum party speed." As the festivity began to move, Sarah felt the subtle vibration of engines that had been completely muffled to avoid any aggressive noise. Through the viewports, she could see other ships in the human fleet, traditional warships that would serve as backup if the psychological warfare approach failed. "Commander," Dr. Vasquez said, "I should mention one more thing about our strategy. We've discovered that Zephyrian culture has no concept of voluntary surrender. They fight to the death in every engagement because they literally don't understand that there's any other option." "How does that help us?" "Because we're not asking them to surrender. We're inviting them to take a vacation. According to our cultural analysis, they'll be completely unprepared for that concept." Sarah watched the stars stream past as the ship jumped to hyperspace. The walls around her showed cheerful holographic displays advertising zero-G dance lessons and interspecies cooking classes. Despite her military training telling her this was the most ridiculous mission in human history, she found herself cautiously optimistic. "Dr. Vasquez," she said, "what happens if this actually works? If we successfully introduce an entire warrior species to the concept of fun?" The psychologist smiled. "Then we'll have accomplished something unprecedented in galactic history. We'll have ended a war, not by destroying our enemies, but by making them too happy to fight." As the ship traveled through hyperspace toward what might be either humanity's greatest victory or most embarrassing defeat, Sarah couldn't help but notice that even she was starting to hum along with the cheerful background music. The USS Festivity was already working its magic, and they hadn't even reached the enemy yet. 3 days later, as they dropped out of hyperspace near Centauri, Sarah stood on the bridge watching the forward displays. Ahead of them, the Zephyrian war fleet hung in space like a collection of deadly black daggers, sleek angular vessels bristling with weapons and radiating an aura of menace. "Sir," Torres announced, "the Zephyrian fleet is hailing us. They're demanding our immediate surrender." Captain Murphy straightened his entertainment director's cap and smiled. "Open a channel, Lieutenant. It's time to send them our party invitation." The main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of a Zephyrian command ship. The alien commander was exactly what Sarah had expected. 7 feet tall, covered in dark scales, with glowing red eyes and an expression that could freeze plasma. Behind him, the bridge was a monument to military efficiency, all sharp edges and weapon displays. "Human vessels," the Zephyrian commander spoke in perfect English, his voice like grinding metal. "I am War Leader Krexth of the Eternal Conquest Fleet. You will surrender your ships immediately or face annihilation." Captain Murphy stood up from his recliner, adjusting his cheerful captain's hat. "Greetings, War Leader Krexth. I'm Captain Murphy of the USS Festivity. We're absolutely thrilled to meet you. Instead of all that surrender business, we'd like to invite you and your crew to the biggest welcome party the galaxy has ever seen." The Zephyrian commander's eyes narrowed in confusion. "Party? Define this term." "Oh, you're in for such a treat," Murphy beamed, gesturing to someone off-screen. Immediately, confetti cannons fired behind him, filling the bridge with colorful paper streamers. "A party is a gathering where beings come together to have fun, enjoy delicious food, play games, and make new friends." Krexth looked like he'd been slapped with a wet fish. "Fun? I do not understand this concept." Dr. Vasquez stepped into view, wearing her best diplomatic smile. "War Leader Krexth, allow me to introduce myself. I'm Dr. Vasquez, Director of Interspecies Cultural Exchange. We've traveled all this way specifically to share the wonders of human hospitality with your people." "This is some kind of trap," Krexth growled, but Sarah noticed he hadn't closed the communication channel. "No trap at all," Murphy said cheerfully. "Look, I understand you're probably tired after all that conquering. When's the last time you and your warriors took a break, had a good meal, enjoyed some music?" "Warriors do not require breaks," Krexth said, but there was a slight hesitation in his voice. "Everyone requires breaks," Dr. Vasquez interjected. "It's a biological necessity for optimal performance. Our studies show that even brief periods of relaxation increase combat efficiency by up to 340%. Now she had his attention. Sarah could see the Zephyrian's military mind processing this information. "You claim that recreation increases warrior effectiveness?" Krexth asked. "Absolutely. In fact, we'd be happy to demonstrate. Why don't you send over a small delegation, say 50 of your warriors, for a brief cultural exchange? 2 hours, maximum. If you don't see improvements in their alertness and morale, you can resume your conquest immediately." Through the tactical display, Sarah watched the Zephyrian fleet. Several ships had moved closer, apparently drawn by curiosity about the strange vessel covered in lights and decorations. Krexth was clearly struggling with the concept. "You invite enemy warriors aboard your vessel? For no tactical purpose?" "For the best tactical purpose of all," Murphy said warmly. "Making friends instead of enemies." The communication channel went silent for several minutes. Sarah could imagine the heated discussions taking place on the Zephyrian command ship. Finally, Krexth's voice returned. "Very well. I will send 50 warriors to investigate this party concept. But know this. Humans, any treachery will result in the immediate destruction of your vessel." "Wonderful." Murphy clapped his hands together. "We'll have the welcome committee ready in Docking Bay 7. Oh, and don't worry about bringing weapons. We provide everything you need for a good time." As the channel closed, Sarah turned to Dr. Vasquez. "Are you sure about this? 50 Zephyrian warriors loose on our ship?" "Trust the plan, Commander," Vasquez replied, but Sarah noticed she was gripping her tablet pretty tightly. An hour later, Sarah stood in Docking Bay 7 watching the most surreal scene of her life. The bay had been transformed into a carnival entrance, complete with a red carpet, balloon arches, and a banner reading "Welcome Zephyrian Friends" in both English and what the translation computers claimed was proper Zephyrian script. The human crew had dressed in their brightest, most non-threatening clothing. Musicians played cheerful tunes while volunteers practiced their friendliest smiles. Tables loaded with exotic foods from across the galaxy lined the walls, and several holographic games flickered invitingly in the corners. "Incoming shuttle," Torres announced from the temporary command post. The Zephyrian shuttle was exactly what Sarah expected, black, angular, and bristling with weapons. It settled onto the deck with military precision, and 50 of the most intimidating aliens Sarah had ever seen filed out in perfect formation. Each warrior was 7 feet of armored muscle and scales, carrying weapons that could probably level buildings. They moved like a single organism, scanning for threats and ready to destroy anything that looked dangerous. What they found instead was Lieutenant Sarah Kim, a petite officer from the Hospitality Corps, standing alone in front of the shuttle with a tray of colorful drinks and the biggest smile in the fleet. "Welcome to the USS Festivity," she called out cheerfully. "I'm Sarah, and I'll be your guide today. Can I offer you a refreshing beverage?" The lead warrior, whose armor bore the rank insignia of a battle captain, stopped so suddenly that the warriors behind him nearly crashed into each other. "You approach armed enemies with beverages?" "Oh, you're not enemies," Sarah laughed, offering him a bright blue drink with a tiny umbrella in it. "You're guests. This is a Centaurian sunset. It's absolutely delicious and completely harmless. Well, except for the mild euphoric effects. But those wear off in an hour or so." The battle captain stared at the drink like it might explode. "Euphoric effects?" "It's like happiness in liquid form," Sarah explained patiently. "Most species find it quite pleasant." While the captain wrestled with this concept, several other warriors had begun looking around the bay with obvious confusion. They'd clearly prepared for battle, ambush, or interrogation. They had no protocol for balloon arches and buffet tables. "Battle Captain Voxtar," one of the younger warriors said, "those devices in the corner appear to be some form of training simulation." Sarah followed his gaze to the holographic arcade games. "Oh, those are games, entertainment devices designed for fun rather than training. Would you like to try one?" "Games," Voxtar repeated slowly. "Activities performed for enjoyment rather than necessity," Dr. Vasquez said, approaching the group with her most reassuring smile. "They serve no military purpose except to provide pleasure and social bonding." The concept seemed to physically pain the Zephyrian captain. "Activities with no purpose? Well, they do have a purpose," Sarah said thoughtfully. "They make you happy." For the next hour, Sarah watched in amazement as 50 of the galaxy's most feared warriors slowly, cautiously, began to discover the concept of fun. It started when one young warrior accidentally triggered a holographic dancing game and found himself moving to the rhythm despite his obvious mortification. The others gathered around, initially to provide backup in case of attack, but gradually becoming curious about the flashing lights and cheerful music. When the game rewarded a particularly good dance move with a shower of virtual stars and an encouraging "fantastic," the warrior's confusion was replaced by something Sarah had never seen on a Zephyrian face: pride in a non-military accomplishment. Within 30 minutes, a small crowd of warriors had formed around the food tables. Their armor's environmental systems were analyzing every dish for toxins, but curiosity was winning over caution. One brave soul tried a piece of chocolate cake and spent the next 5 minutes in what could only be described as existential crisis. "Captain Voxtar," the warrior finally said, "this substance appears to trigger pleasure responses in the neural cortex without any apparent tactical benefit." "Is this a form of chemical warfare?" Voxtar demanded, but his tone lacked conviction. "Only if you consider happiness to be an attack," Murphy replied, appearing beside them with his own piece of cake. "We call it dessert. Would you like to try some?" The battle captain stared at the offered fork like it was a live grenade. Around him, his warriors were slowly spreading throughout the bay, drawn by various attractions. Some had discovered the massage chairs and were experiencing relaxation for the first time in their lives. Others had found the music room and were listening to classical compositions from dozens of worlds with expressions of wonder. I do not understand, Voxtar finally said. Where is your military advantage in this? How does providing comfort to enemies serve your strategic objectives? Sarah watched Murphy consider his answer carefully. Battle Captain, can I ask you something? When did you last sleep well? Not the maintenance cycles your species requires, but actual peaceful rest. The question clearly confused the Zephyrian. Sleep is a biological necessity, not a strategic consideration. But good sleep, comfortable sleep, when you wake up feeling refreshed instead of just functional? Voxtar was quiet for a long moment. Around them, his warriors were discovering new experiences by the minute. Two had found the music creation station and were tentatively experimenting with making sounds that pleased them rather than intimidated enemies. I do not recall such an experience, Voxtar admitted. Would you like to try it? Murphy asked gently. We have rest areas designed for maximum comfort. No obligations, no tricks, just a chance to experience what peace feels like. As Sarah watched the proud alien warrior struggle with concepts that every human child understood instinctively, she realized they were witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. They weren't just fighting a war. They were teaching an entire species how to live. 6 hours had passed since the Zephyrian delegation boarded the festivity, and Sarah was watching the most extraordinary transformation she'd ever witnessed. The bay that had welcomed 50 rigid, suspicious warriors now hosted 50 aliens who looked like they were discovering what it meant to be alive. Battle Captain Voxtar sat in a massage chair, his armor carefully removed and set aside, experiencing relaxation for the first time in his 70-year military career. His eyes were closed, and his usual tense expression had been replaced by something that almost looked like peace. Commander, Dr. Vasquez whispered, appearing beside Sarah with a data pad. You need to see these biometric readings. The Zephyrians' stress hormones have dropped by 80%. Their neural activity patterns show increased creativity and reduced aggression markers. They're literally becoming different beings. Around the bay, Zephyrian warriors were engaged in activities that would have been unthinkable hours earlier. A group had gathered around the cooking station, carefully following a human chef's instructions for making pasta. Their military precision, applied to sauce making, was creating some of the most perfectly prepared meals Sarah had ever seen. Others had discovered the art gallery and were standing in silent contemplation before paintings from Earth. One young warrior, who couldn't have been much older than 20 in human years, was staring at a Van Gogh reproduction with tears in his eyes. I do not understand, the young warrior was saying to Lieutenant Torres, who had appointed himself unofficial art guide. This human created patterns of color that trigger emotional responses. But why? What tactical advantage does this provide? None, Torres replied gently. Van Gogh painted because beauty mattered to him more than advantage. The concept seemed to physically stagger the young Zephyrian. Commander Chen, Captain Murphy's voice came through her communicator. We're receiving urgent communications from the Zephyrian fleet. War leader Krexth is demanding the immediate return of his warriors. Sarah looked around the bay. The 50 Zephyrians showed no signs of wanting to leave. In fact, several had already asked about extending their visit. Sir, she replied into her communicator, I don't think they want to go back. On cue, Battle Captain Voxtar opened his eyes and sat up in the massage chair. His transformation was remarkable. Where there had been rigid tension, now there was fluid ease. Where there had been constant vigilance, now there was curious openness. Human Murphy, Voxtar called out, I must speak with my war leader immediately. Of course, Murphy replied, gesturing toward the communication station that had been decorated to look like a customer service desk. Would you like privacy for your call? No, Voxtar said firmly. All should hear what I have to say. The main screen activated, showing War Leader Krexith on his command bridge. His expression was even more thunderous than before. But when he saw Voxtar's relaxed posture and peaceful expression, confusion replaced anger. "Battle, Captain," Krexith growled. "Report your status immediately. Have you been drugged?" "In a manner of speaking, yes," Voxtar replied calmly. "I have been exposed to substances that create pleasure without pain, rest without exhaustion, and satisfaction without conquest. That is impossible. Remove yourself from that vessel immediately." "War Leader," Voxtar said, standing with the fluid grace of someone whose muscles were no longer locked in constant tension. "I must ask you a question. Do you remember your birth clutch?" The question clearly caught Krexith off guard. "What relevance does this have? Do you remember playing with your clutch mates before the military academies separated you? Do you remember the joy of discovery, the pleasure of learning something new just because it was interesting?" Krexith's scaled face showed the first crack in its military composure. "Those were childhood memories, irrelevant to warrior duties." "Were they?" Voxtar walked closer to the screen. Behind him, his warriors had gathered, all showing the same transformed demeanor. "War Leader, these humans have shown us something extraordinary. They have shown us what we were before we became weapons." "You speak like a defector," Krexith accused, but his voice lacked conviction. "I speak like a being who has remembered what it feels like to be alive rather than merely functional." Voxtar gestured to his warriors. "Look at them, War Leader. When did you last see Zephyrian faces without the mask of constant vigilance?" Sarah watched Krexith's expression as he studied his warriors through the screen. They looked happy. It was a word she never thought she'd apply to Zephyrian soldiers, but there was no other term that fit. They were interacting with humans not as conquerors and conquered, but as equals sharing new experiences. "This is some form of mind control," Krexith said, but he sounded like he was trying to convince himself. "No mind control," Dr. Vasquez interjected, stepping into view. "Just the natural response of any intelligent being to kindness, comfort, and genuine care. War Leader, when did your people last experience peace?" "We are warriors," Krexith replied automatically. "We do not require peace." "But do you want it?" Vasquez pressed gently. The question hung in the air like a challenge to everything the Zephyrian Empire represented. Sarah could see the internal battle playing out on Krexith's face, 1,000 years of military conditioning warring against the evidence of his own warrior's transformation. "War Leader," one of Voxtar's warriors spoke up, the young one who had been moved to tears by Van Gogh. "Permission to address the command?" Krexith nodded stiffly. "Sir, I have discovered something called art. Humans create objects and patterns that serve no tactical purpose except to please the senses and stir emotions. I would like to learn more about this concept." Another warrior stepped forward. "War Leader, I have experienced friendship, alliance without strategic benefit, cooperation based on mutual enjoyment rather than tactical necessity. And I have learned music," another added, "organized sound that creates pleasure and unity without any military application." One by one, Voxtar's warriors shared their discoveries, their voices growing stronger with each revelation. They had found aspects of existence that their culture had systematically eliminated in its pursuit of military efficiency. "War Leader," Voxtar said finally, "I formally request permission to remain aboard this vessel for extended cultural exchange." "As do I," said the young warrior. "And I," said another. Within moments, all 50 warriors had made the same request. They weren't defecting. They were choosing to learn what it meant to live rather than merely survive. Krexith stared at his transformed warriors in silence. Sarah could see something shifting in his expression. the rigid military mask beginning to crack. "War leader," Captain Murphy said gently, "you're welcome to join them. We have room for everyone, and I think you might find the experience educational." "I am the commander of the Eternal Conquest Fleet," Krexith replied, but his voice lacked its usual authority. "And you'll still be their commander," Murphy assured him. "But perhaps you could be something more as well. Perhaps you could be someone who leads his people not just to victory, but to happiness." The bridge around Krexith had fallen completely silent. His own command crew were listening to the conversation, and Sarah could see the same curiosity in their eyes that had transformed Voxtar's warriors. "War leader," Voxtar said softly, "do you remember the last time you felt genuine joy?" Krexth was quiet for so long that Sarah wondered if the transmission had failed. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. I do not remember ever feeling such a thing." "Then perhaps," Voxtar said with infinite gentleness, "it is time to learn." 3 days later, Sarah stood on the observation deck watching a sight that no one in galactic history had ever witnessed before. The Eternal Conquest Fleet hung in space alongside the USS Festivity, but the warships had been transformed. Colorful lights now decorated their hulls, and music drifted between the vessels as crews shared cultural exchanges. War leader Krexth had not only accepted the invitation, he had opened the exchange to his entire fleet. Thousands of Zephyrian warriors were discovering art, music, friendship, and peace for the first time in their species' recorded history. "Admiral Rodriguez is calling it the Velvet Revolution," Dr. Vasquez said, joining Sarah at the window. "The first war in history won by kindness rather than force." "What happens now?" Sarah asked, watching a group of Zephyrian children. Apparently, they'd been hiding families in the support ships, playing with human children in the expanded recreation areas. "Now we help them figure out what to do with a 1,000-year-old empire that suddenly doesn't want to conquer anyone anymore," Vasquez replied. "Krexith has already sent diplomatic messages to all the systems they've conquered, offering reparations and assistance in rebuilding." "And the other Zephyrian fleets?" "Word is spreading. It seems that when you give warriors a choice between endless conflict and genuine happiness, the choice isn't as difficult as their leaders always assumed." Sarah smiled as she watched a Zephyrian engineer showing human technicians how to improve their engine efficiency, while human cooks taught Zephyrian warriors how to make pizza. The two species were learning from each other, creating something entirely new. "Dr. Vasquez," Sarah said, "remind me never to doubt human ingenuity again. When conventional weapons failed, we invented the most powerful weapon of all." "Which is?" "Friendship," Sarah replied, watching as war leader Krexith, now apparently going by just Krex, laughed at something Captain Murphy had said while they shared what appeared to be ice cream sundaes. The USS Festivity had accomplished something no warship in history ever had. It had won a war by refusing to fight it, choosing instead to show their enemies what they could have if they stopped being enemies at all. In the distance, more ships were approaching, other species drawn by reports of the strangest alliance in galactic history. The party, it seemed, was just getting started.